Wife who vanished while hiking the Appalachian Trail turns up 2 years later. "66-year-old Geraldine Largay of Tennessee was never one to shy away from a challenge, no matter how extreme. However, one obstacle did ultimately prove too much for her when, after setting off on one of the most difficult hiking trails in North America, she disappeared without a trace. Her friends and family grieved, praying for closure that they feared would never come. That is, until years later, with Geraldine's whereabouts still unknown, when a TV crew made an unexpected discovery that left her loved ones speechless. Before we begin, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe to our channel, and click the notification bell for more amazing videos. For hiking enthusiasts, the Appalachian Trail is considered one of the most breathtaking through hiking experiences in the world. Winding its way through 14 states, the Appalachian Trail is the perfect way to experience all the beauty that the U.S. Eastern Coast has to offer. But make no mistake, the Appalachian Trail is not for the faint of heart. The 2,200-mile path is marked by rugged terrain and extreme climates. And of the nearly 4,000 experienced hikers to set out on the AT each year, only about a quarter hike to completion. Those odds aren't great, but for Geraldine Largay, they were still odds worth taking. The 66-year-old retired nurse from Tennessee was searching for her next great adventure, and in the spring of 2013, she decided that the Appalachian Trail was just that. Despite an anxious nature, Jerry resolved to hike the trail without her husband, George, believing this challenge was one that she needed to overcome alone. Still, that didn't stop her childhood friend, Jane Lee, from tagging along in pursuit of her own life-changing adventure. And so, on April 23, 2013, the two women set off on their first leg of the Appalachian Trail, entering through a trail opening in Harper's Ferry, West Virginia. Unlike most who tackle the AT, however, Jerry and Jane decided to go about their hike a little differently. Instead of through hiking the trail with no assistance, Jerry and Jane were met along the way by George, who would resupply them and even take them to a hotel for the evening to shower and rest. After all, these women were in their 60s. The less risk they had to take on the trail, the better. Yet age was not the only factor that made the hike a dangerous endeavor. Jerry had a notoriously poor sense of direction and would often make wrong turns on the trail, making these short stops, as well as Jane's presence, all the more essential. Despite these precautions, however, Jerry and Jane's adventure came to a grinding halt just 2 months in. After getting word of a family emergency back home, Jane was forced to abandon their hike just a few miles into New Hampshire. Before she did, Jane implored her companion to return home with her, believing that Jerry wasn't equipped to handle the remaining stretch of the AT. But Jerry wouldn't be swayed. She was going to finish what she started. Over the next few weeks, the 66-year-old steadily made her way through New Hampshire and into Maine, the finish line in sight. She rested briefly on July 22nd, and a group of fellow hikers snapped this picture of her. Perhaps seeing this photo would have calmed George's nerves, as 2 days after it was taken, he had received no word from Jerry despite scheduling a call with her to check in. When the 24th came and went without sign of his wife, George knew he had to act. He contacted the Maine Department of Parks and Recreation, who immediately summoned a search party for what would become the largest manhunt in state history. For 20 days, volunteers combed every inch of Maine wilderness, though by the end, Jerry was still nowhere to be found. Heartbroken, George and the rest of the Largay family had no choice but to assume the worst and held a memorial service for the beloved wife and mother later that year. But had Jerry really perished on the trail? Some investigators weren't so sure. According to one witness, a woman matching Jerry's description was spotted wandering through a nearby town, though around the same time, another witness claimed to have seen Jerry living in a woman's shelter back in Tennessee. Investigators were stumped, though. In October 2015, they finally got their answer. While filming an episode of Northwood's Law, an Animal Planet film, crews stumbled upon a crumpled yellow tent just a half-mile off the Appalachian Trail. They assumed it had been left behind by a hiker who had set up camp off the trail. They were wrong. Beneath the rotting remains of the tent was a body so decayed that the crew was unsure police would be able to identify it. Further investigation uncovered a journal tucked beneath the corpse, and inside they discovered a heartbreaking truth. The body belonged to Geraldine Largay, who, according to the journal, had wandered off the AT shortly after chatting with the hikers on July 22nd and was unable to find her way back. With the trail out of sight and her supplies dwindling, she waited for help, which never came. Most tragic of all, however, was the final note she left behind. When you find my body, please call my husband George and my daughter Carrie. It will be the greatest kindness for them to know that I am dead and where you find me, no matter how many years from now." Incredibly, Jerry had survived 26 days alone in the Maine wilderness and wrote in her journal right up until the very end. And while the search for the missing hiker had ended sometime around August 4th, 2018, the journal showed that she was still alive as late as August 18th. With this news, George and the Largays were finally able to rest easy, knowing that Jerry was at peace. Despite losing the love of his life, George had no regrets about encouraging Jerry to hike the trail because she died doing what she loved, living life to the fullest. Please share this story with your friends and family.